Imagine sitting with a friend who admits they barely feel the joy of finishing a project after hours of social media scrolling. They are not lazy because their biology has simply adjusted the sensitivity of their reward system to survive the noise. Your brain contains specific sensors that act like volume knobs on your desire and focus, known scientifically as D2 receptors. When you flood them with constant digital feedback, those sensors turn down automatically to protect you from overload. This natural defense is called synaptic homeostasis. It is not brokenness, but a survival mechanism designed for a slower world. But here lies the puzzle. If your brain constantly protects itself from too much stimulation, then why does stepping back feel so difficult? So, if your brain is actively fighting against withdrawal, why does pulling the plug feel like breaking an addiction? The answer isn't in willpower, it's written in chemistry. When you bombard yourself with input, your neurons shrink their receptors to survive this constant demand. But they aren't broken forever. Research reveals a natural repair system hidden inside your synapses. This process is called synaptic homeostasis, where the brain literally adds new docking ports for dopamine during rest periods. Think of it like solar panels that only install themselves when it's dark outside. We need less stimulation to build more sensitivity. It's not about stopping the noise, but creating the quiet needed to grow those sensors back. But figuring out how to actually create that perfect reset without falling back into the trap might be harder than you think. So, if the reset is that hard to achieve, maybe the system isn't just waiting for you to stop. It actually has a repair crew on standby. Think of your receptors like volume knobs. When you blast them with endless notifications, they get tired and turn down sensitivity. But here is where it gets interesting. The neurons aren't broken. They actively change their own chemistry when the noise stops. Recent studies show that reduced stimulation triggers Krebs pathways to rebuild those D2 sensors naturally without any pharmaceutical help. This synaptic scaling acts like a biological thermostat, turning up the volume on your own reward system again. You are essentially letting the biology catch up with the digital flood. We now know the mechanism is intrinsic, but there is a specific kind of quiet required before that repair crew actually shows up to do the work we need. So that quiet isn't just empty space, it is an active construction zone deep inside your cortex. While you think you are merely resting, the cells begin scaling their sensitivity back up naturally without external aid. It feels like a radio tuned through heavy static finally finding a clear channel on its own. The biology does not require a pill to fix the wiring because the receptors physically rebuild when stimulation drops. But here is the catch regarding exactly how long that silence needs to last before your brain forgets the lesson entirely. We are standing on the edge of seeing what happens if you cross that threshold too fast without proper protection. But that is where our biology begins its own counterattack against burnout. When we remove the constant noise, the cells do not just stay numb, they start rebuilding the very receptors that were silenced by too much input. Imagine trying to listen in a crowded room versus stepping into a quiet library. The brain senses the change and decides it can afford to turn up the volume again on its own terms. Reduced stimulation triggers an internal switch that restores sensitivity to natural rewards without magic or external shortcuts. It is the system fixing itself through intrinsic genetic code. Recovery happens from within if we provide the correct environment. But simply resting might not be enough. There is a precise rhythm needed to actually flip that switch open without damaging the fragile circuitry further. What exactly does this rhythm require? It requires you to lower the volume on the noise long enough for the brain to catch up. Imagine these receptors are like pressure-sensitive switches inside every cell. Flood them with constant high-frequency signals and they shut down to survive. But here is the twist. If you stop the bombardment, they do not stay numb. They actively rebuild their sensitivity through endogenous upregulation, driven by cells sensing quiet. Inside a process called synaptic homeostasis, reduced drive triggers changes to restore receptor density naturally. You are letting the circuit cool down so it can heal without external help. The real question is how we engineer this quiet time into a chaotic lifestyle without breaking daily flow. We need a strategy that works while you are awake. How do we build this quiet space without sacrificing daily function? So we need a quiet space while awake. That sounds like a contradiction, but your brain actually builds sensitivity when you stop demanding it for too long. Think of a radio dial stuck at maximum static. When you flood the system with constant digital light, the neurons shrink their D2 receptors to survive the noise. This isn't damage, it is a specific cellular response called homeostatic scaling, where the brain literally turns down the volume to protect against overload. If the signal has been too loud for years, how do we tell them to turn back up? We discovered that simply reducing the frequency of high stimulation triggers a natural repair protocol that works like a reset button. But this repair mechanism requires a very specific environmental key that most people miss before they can rebuild. The method to trigger that potential comes next. It turns out the reset button isn't found in a pill bottle, but in quiet space and deep focus. Your biology has built-in mechanisms to fix itself once you stop shouting at the neurons with constant notifications. Flow state, willpower reset, and clarity aren't magic tricks. They are the result of letting your brain restore its natural gain settings without interference. This means trading external stimulation for internal regulation. You simply reduce the noise until your D2 receptors climb back up naturally to catch the right signals again. Stop fighting your chemistry and start designing an environment that lets it heal itself. That is how you rebuild what was broken without drugs or hacks. The full research archive is at jmthomasofficial.com.